right, so we are live. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Nate again with another panel discussion for I Love You. Today's panel discussion is going to be amazing because I have an all-women's panel. You guys requested it. You asked me, you DM me, you sent me text messages about it, about women having a discussion just as we were doing for the young boys and Black men. So now we have a few amazing Black women on the line right now, and we're going to have this discussion. Feel free to jump in the chat, write some different thoughts. You can put questions in there, whatever it is that you want to do. But tonight's conversation is going to be based around Black women and vulnerability, which is a topic that I really want to discuss and understand more so I can be of better service to Black women and minority women. So we have Natalie, Aisha, Delisa, Jamaica, Willeen, and then we also have another special guest, Michelle, who will be on just a little bit later, probably about 15, 20 minutes into the conversation. So what I want to do is this. I want to start this panel off with this question of talking about the strong Black woman label that's out there. We know it all too well. Me and my mom talked about it, that label of just having to be strong all the time, to a time where you can't even be vulnerable. You can't really express your emotions. You can't have a moment when you're weak because you're always seen as the strong Black woman. And I want to ask you all, one, how do you feel about that label? And also, do you feel as though that prevents you from actually being vulnerable? And anybody can go.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't think I made a post about that about a week and a half ago. It's okay to be vulnerable, and that the synonym of vulnerable is kind of like weakness. But in this sense, vulnerability is actually strength, because you actually get power when you cry. You get power when you express all of these emotions that we've been taught. Some of us not even taught just word of mouth, it's just what we've seen is that you don't do this, in front of your husband or your boyfriend, or, you go cry in the car, you cry in the bathroom and things like this. And you're not even really allowed to open up and be vulnerable, because unfortunately, even sometimes when we come out to speak, it's taken the wrong way, like we're being angry or we're just so misunderstood with everything that we say. And so it's like that pushes us further into a shell where it's like, okay, let me just go back to being this strong woman, because I'm not even allowed to say anything, because anything that I say is going to kind of be twisted. So I don't really like it.
Yeah, definitely. I can chime in and piggyback off of that as well. I think the expectations of strength definitely harm the Black woman. And again, thank you, Nate, for having me on here as well. But the first thing I thought about when I saw the title, I don't know about anybody else, but I thought about my mom. And I just thought, the first thing I thought was like, yo, I've never seen my mom cry. And I'm 30 years old. I just turned 30, and I've never seen my mother cry, with the exceptions of things like, a funeral or the death of a family member or a friend, whatever the case is. But I think that environment that, at least speaking for myself, that I grew up around, when I was vulnerable as a child, my vulnerability was met with resistance, and it was automatically confronted with correction, in that you got to stop crying, you got to be strong. And I think because of that, we're conditioned to that mentality as we grow up. And now we, just like you were saying, Delisa, we're just like, we grew accustomed to, you cannot cry. It's not okay to cry. And it's a lot of the same stigmas that we see with men as well. It's just, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's really, you have to be really intentional, and it takes a lot of work to break that pattern and to actually be vulnerable and feel comfortable doing so.
And even for me, I have I'm West African, so I have an additional layer of strongness that I learned from the African background. So for me, the Black woman or Black American woman experience is a little different for me. It's new, but there's a lot of similarities, because even when I was, if I take it as a young girl, even when I was thrown into, when I first moved to America, I lived in a majority white neighborhood. But when I moved into the Black area, I was not accepted, right? So for me, I dealt with, even as a young girl, trying to fit into Black America, even though everyone to me looked like me. It was like an identity crisis. So even as a young girl, I felt like there was a level of toughness that I needed to fit into this new community of people that were Black Americans. They looked like me, but there was a difference there. So even for me, I see both sides of it, because even coming from another country, there's a level of strength. My parents brought me here with this mindset that we're coming here. We look at the United States as a land of opportunity, a land to like get it done. You don't cry, you got to rock it out. And then I'm also in a environment where I'm not accepted. So there's a level of strength that I had to have and adjustments that I needed to make. And then even as I transition into, now I'm a single parent, I'm in the military, there's a level of strength that I have to have in those areas as well. So, I mean, I've always fought that label, because there's a level of vulnerability that I want to have, but I'm in so many spaces where I feel like I have to be strong all the time for my kids. I got to be strong because of the position I have in the military. I have to be strong so I'm not taken advantage of, which just connects to the trauma that I experienced as a young girl. So I see both sides of it, but I have to say, like, right now, in the midst of where I'm at, that level of strength and that level of vulnerability I war with, because of the fact that I've been through trauma before, because of the fact that I juggle so many hats, that even right now in this season, I'm struggling with being vulnerable, because there's a part of me that says, but you'll be taken advantage of. So that's just where I'm at right now, the season I'm in.
For me, it's a little different. I was raised by my great grandmother. She was 67, and my sister and I were 5 and 6. So we were always taught, there's no other definition but a strong Black woman. You watch her raise her kids, her grandkids, her great grandkids, even down to her great great grandkids. So for us, it's the norm. But for me and my, for what I do for a living and how the public perceives me is a strong Black woman. But what I did to combat that is I made sure that the people around me supported me. That if I needed anything, I had this support system, whether it's through a text or a phone call, whether it's the people just literally around you that no matter what, you can be yourself. And that helps me balance it, because no matter what, when you're young and you're brown and you're intelligent, people expect so much more from you. So I use the people around me to offset. So when I hear a strong Black woman, sometimes I take it as a compliment, but it also depends on who I hear it from. If they don't look like me, I take offense. But that's how I've learned to just disguise and not always speak with my face, my facial expressions. But the reality is I do embrace it based on what I've seen. She was 67. My sister and I were 5 and 6. So I embrace the title, but it all depends on who it comes from.
And I agree with Elisa. Now, when you hear the word vulnerable, you automatically think weak. Oh, she's crying. She can't handle this. So you're kind of stuck in between. Well, if I have a bad day, do I share it or do I just keep it to myself? So I think that, as a social worker, I believe everybody should be vulnerable at times, but I know it's difficult for Black women to display that, because you'll never want to be seen as weak or not being able to handle certain situations. So we definitely need to, change the outlook on that word.
I really appreciate each one of you sharing. So just listening to every insight that y'all gave, is there a fear of rejection that plays into the lack of vulnerability? Is that am I off with that?
No, I think you're right on. I think, with vulnerability for the Black woman or for anyone, there has to be that space where you feel safe to be vulnerable. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not too sure if I was cut off, but if your vulnerability is met with resistance, you're not going to feel comfortable to be vulnerable again with that same person or in another situation. So I think there is this fear that when you're vulnerable, no one's going to be receptive to it. And as Jamaica was just saying, you're going to be labeled as being weak. Whereas if you're in a situation where you are vulnerable and the response is, it's okay, it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel hurt, and it's normalized, then only at that point will we start to, feel okay with being vulnerable. But I think it starts with having that safe space of being able to be comforted in your time of need.
I agree.
And I know no, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm not sure if it was your post or somebody posted on Facebook recently, where do you cry for women? And I think almost every woman put down either in the car or in the shower. Nobody said to their partner, to their friends. Everybody was like car, shower, or when I'm alone. It was like nobody wanted to say, I'm with my husband or with my friends, my sisters. I think it's just natural for people to feel like, okay, I'm having a weak moment, stay to myself. So finding that safe space is important because you can't handle everything on your own. Mm-hmm. And that's actually strength, being able to share that with other people.
Yeah, and I just know from me, my fight with vulnerability and strength is birthed from my trauma. So I know for me, like I tell a lot of people, when you are struggling with something, how are you identifying or going back to find out where that was birthed, where that came from? And for me, it came from my trauma. It came from, the things I experienced as a young, I'm a 37-year-old woman, and my bullying that happened when I was, 9-10 years old still affects me today. So it was birthed from there. And again, when you've had repeated trauma happen over and over again, when you find yourself trying to be vulnerable, it kind of like, it confirms that fear, even though it might be fake, even though it might not be real, even though vulnerability is strength, things that happen multiple times, it confirms it. So you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be vulnerable. Maybe I shouldn't be open. And that's why I say it's so important that, therapy and mental health is something that is a regular thing that people look into, because going to a therapist just really unlocked so much stuff that I had from way when I was a child that is helping me become more vulnerable. But that's why it's important that we're also aware and we know. I had a conversation with someone recently. I'm like, somebody that, I've been in the process of dating, and I had a conversation. I'm like, we have to realize that when we enter into the dating space or friendships, we have to realize that we don't want to trigger anybody's traumas. And it might be unintentionally, but we have to really even be mindful with our interactions with each other to ensure that we think of that in the background. Like, you have people who have dealt with trauma and they've been through a lot of things. So you have to be mindful about the care and how you communicate and connect with people, so you don't trigger them because you're not even considering how they feel. So I know my trauma has triggered my lack of vulnerability. And it's just something that I'm working through.
Yeah, I think it's definitely fear related. I was just sitting here thinking about how it's not really that I'm scared to open up. It's just I don't really want to, because I've always felt like I'm the strong one in the family. Everybody calls me to vent, everybody calls me to cry and stuff like that. So it's like I don't feel the freedom to get to be vulnerable because I'm always the one uplifting everybody. So when it's time for me, to maybe need somebody or need a shoulder, I close myself off because I'm like, I know everybody has stuff going on. I'm not gonna vent to nobody else. I'm not gonna let anybody know, that I'm struggling, or that I'm dealing with this, or that I'm dealing with that, because I don't want to put whatever I have going on off on them. And I know a lot of women have felt like that as well, like feeling like you're always the strong one. But it's really not healthy, because I even found myself in that same situation recently where I kind of snapped, and it wasn't the person's fault. It was because I did it. I kept holding stuff in, and even times where I could have cried alone, I didn't cry. Just constantly taking, because it's like something in my head was always like, you just need to be strong. You just need to be strong. Like, I don't know if it's just different voices within my family, but it's just like I always heard, like, you need to be strong. There's no need to cry and things like that. So that's why I was saying that I'm really learning now that being vulnerable is not even a weakness, it's a strength, because you don't have to have those episodes where you blow up and, you just reach your max and now you're letting it all out. If you're doing it as it comes to you, you're actually growing stronger along the way. So,
yeah, definitely.
That's a tough one for me, because I'm not afraid of much rejection. And I think that's probably what makes me even more vulnerable, because my family do depend on me for almost everything, both sides. So when it's time to get something done, I will be the person. It doesn't matter what it is either. So so for me, that's a tough one, because I don't have the fear, but I sometimes I think maybe I don't have the fear because I was rejected so much as a kid. So it's like, you know what's the worst that can happen? And if you know me, you know that's my motto. Just ask for it. So I that's a tough one for me. But I also think that helped me grow quickly in my career because I just, ask the question, not having the fear that I'm going to be rejected. The reality is for me, if I'm rejected, I'm where I was before I asked. So that's a tough question for me because I'm not really sure, where I am on that.
So is there a level of like burnout, or you feel a burden? Do you ever feel that because it's you, like you say, you're carrying all this, everybody, they need you, they need that support from you. It's like, what are the practices or whatever when you feel burnt out? Because we all do that. It's just the reality. We human. It's going to happen. You can think that you're superwoman, which you all are. You're all amazing. But at the end of the day, it's like at some point you need to recharge yourself. You need to go ahead and fill your own cup up. Um, when do you have that? What does that time look like for you to recharge, especially because you all are giving so much of yourself? That way you're not exploding. You know what I'm saying? You're not blowing up on people. What does that look like? What does that process look like?
I think it definitely takes being intentional, right? First and foremost, that's something you have to be intentional about doing, especially for somebody like myself, who I'm a social worker, I'm a mental health clinician. I do individual therapy, counseling, all of that. You're constantly giving. I think you have to be intentional about developing a sense of self-awareness of when do you feel burdened and when do you feel worn out. And it really is just knowing yourself, because that level looks and feels different for every person. There's a lot of people that can tolerate a lot more. And then there's people who need, maybe less time alone. So I know for me, the way I consolidate that is by taking moments throughout the day, because my tolerance for just how much I can handle is maybe shorter than some people. So I counter that by taking moments away throughout the day, whether it's 5 minutes to meditate, whether it's 3 minutes of just like silence. But it really does take being intentional. I find that I have to really, really like tune in to myself and tune out all of the noise, like shutting down social media, even turning off my music, and really like talking to myself and figuring out where I am mentally, and what I need. And a lot of that is also not being afraid to admit that. And it all goes back to just the whole conversation that we're having. I think when you resonate with like what Delisa was saying, when you're that person, you're that go-to for so many people, for your friends, for your family, for your coworkers, you almost feel like you can't say, no, I need time to myself, because you're like, you get anxiety about it, almost like if I say no, who's going to be there for that person? And it's just really being comfortable being like, listen, I definitely want to help you, but right now I really just need a minute. And, I just really grew to the point where I'm just not afraid to say that anymore. And I'm not afraid to let people know that today's just not the day. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely it for me too. I'm just now getting to the point to where I'm learning how to say no. Because it's like, it doesn't matter what I have going on. If somebody calls or they text, it's like, okay, I can scoot you in, in 5 minutes. And I already know that I'm overwhelmed, but it's just that need to help everybody. Regardless of where I'm at with helping myself, it's just they need to always give. And so now I'm really, really learning the importance of self-care. And for me, that looks different. It may look like a short trip. It could be something as simple as going to sit in my car for 5 minutes, maybe listen to 5 minutes of a podcast, just whatever it is to just get my mind just settled and my spirit settled. It could be reading a short devotional. It's just something to just put myself first, even for a moment. I'm really learning that. And that's what it's helping me now. But like I said, I had to get to that, because at first I would just let myself be maxed out, even though I knew the pressure was there and I wouldn't do anything about it. So.
And for me, someone introduced me to personal development like a couple of years ago. And I'm like, what is this personal development thing? And that's where you start seeing these videos of these motivational speakers. And it was like, it unlocked the door for me. And then when I really started to focus on helping young people and helping people, and knowing that in order for me to help young people through mental health trauma and suicide prevention, that it was taking a toll on me because it was triggering a lot of the experiences that I had. And from there, I was like, Aisha, you need to start utilizing therapy. And therapy has been a game changer for me because I think that we focus so much on the other aspects of health, our physical health. We talk about emotional health, but a lot of times we don't think about mental health. We think we're only going to go to maybe a therapist when things get crazy. But I think that mental health should be something that we practice on a regular basis. So I have an ongoing therapist that I'm seeing every month, and I'm talking to her about my month. Even if I had a good week, I'm still talking to her because, again, when you are serving others and you're supporting others and you're taking in so much, you need an outlet. And I know for her, I'm not judged. I can talk to her about anything because, again, some of us don't have people that we can talk to anything about. We might have that one friend we can talk to about relationships. We might have this one friend we can't talk to about this because, she off the hook. So I know with this person, I could talk to them about everything. So now that I've embedded in that, now I have an outlet to be like, man, I was talking to a young person, or I was helping this leader, and man, I don't know how to deal with it. She has an unbiased opinion because she doesn't know me. We built that relationship over time. So that has been a game changer for me, therapy, because like I said, it's allowing me to unpack stuff that's deep down, like below my subconscious that I don't even realize. And now it's allowing me to truly heal, which is helping me become more vulnerable. So like I said, I'm an advocate for mental health and therapy. So if you have not utilized it, or if you're thinking about it, you should, because it's been a game changer for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I think I agree. I'm sorry. I agree with it has to be intentional. Like there's a lot that we deal with. As everyone said, it has to be intentional, whether it's a trip, whether it's just sitting outside on the beach with a wine cooler and music for 10 hours, whatever it is, it has to be intentional. You have to know when you're getting to that point before you lose it. And it took some time for at least me to know when I'm getting to that point. So I have nothing else in addition to say. Everybody just said it perfectly.
I think also. Jamaica, go ahead. You were going to say?
No, I agree with everybody. It had to be intentional, and like you said, because if you don't let it happen, you will blow up and you will lose it, and then you'll feel even more guilty because now you don't went off on somebody, not because of them, but because you're so overwhelmed and drowning in everything else that you have to take care of yourself. So definitely intentional is the word for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like the clinical, if you will, term for wearing things is like the vicarious trauma, like, especially when you're in a position where like, I was working in a child protection agency for 6 years, and you start to like I'm very empathetic, and I start to feel what other people are going through, like to the point where sometimes it brings me to tears. Like, and I think like we have to be aware that constantly, wearing and bearing other people's issues, it starts to become your own. You start to embody that. So, I learned, I went to like a conference. It's a conference called a Maven's World Conference. It's a women's conference. It's amazing. It was an amazing conference, but I learned there something that really resonated with me. And, when you think about everybody saying like, you gotta fill your own cup before you give to others, like I think of it in the literal terms. Like, I'm gonna just use my cup of coffee here. Like for me, like I gotta be to the tip top and everybody else gets the overflow. So what's coming out is what I give to other people, but I need to make sure that in order for me to be my best self and for me to give you the best and most effective advice, my cup got to be full. And the minute it comes down even a little sip, I'm like, all right, now I got to recharge. I got to refill. And then the overflow is what goes to everybody else. So I literally think of myself as just a tall glass of wine or something. And like, whenever something comes out, I gotta pour it back in, and then everybody else will get what's leaking out. So that really helped me.
And I think one common theme that I heard from, a lot of this is boundaries. Like if you aren't practicing boundaries, please start doing that now. Like I have a lot of clients that I work with women that I'm helping overcome their trauma. And a lot of them are, again, having that syndrome of always having the cape on. And one of the practices that we always talk about or steps in the process is boundaries, because if you've never learned that, if you've never seen that, then you're always want to say yes. So boundaries is going to allow you to say no more often. But practicing that and being okay to say no is going to allow you to have more time to be able to focus on yourself more. But I didn't learn boundaries as a young girl. I didn't learn boundaries as a young woman. So now as an adult, I'm learning the power of boundaries. So if it's not something that you are practicing or learning about and just making it a regular thing that you start to master, you're going to find yourself saying yes too often. So boundaries and learning how to have them is so powerful, and allotting time for yourself to work on, having that overflow that you were just talking about.
Boundary. When I think of boundaries, right, it's like you said, people are pulling at you all the time, right? People are pulling at you, and boundaries are difficult, right? I remember the first time saying no to like my parents. Like boundaries are difficult. And not in the sense of me being selfish, but in the sense of like, I need my own, my own space. I need to get myself together. My mom is actually on here. Hey, Mom. So I just wanted to put that out there. But it's one of those things where it's like, if everybody's been pulling at you, you can be afraid to lose those people that are close to you by putting up these boundaries. I believe that that's a fear for me. So I'm going to assume, and I'm not going to assume, I'm going to ask you, is that a fear for you ladies, putting up that boundary and losing people that are close to you?
Yeah, it's definitely I say it was 100% a fear for me, like because of what you just said, Nate. You get afraid that you're going to lose friends if you say no. But again, as I grew in my own personal development, I realized that, and I'm okay with the fact that you are going to lose some people for saying no, but it all goes back to understanding yourself and what you can tolerate. And saying no to a person in that moment also doesn't mean I'm never going to be there for you again in the future. It just means right now I need to take time to myself. And I feel like the people that are closest to you and the people that truly love you would understand and respect that. And then, of course, you're going to have a handful of people who like are going to pull, and they're going to just run you dry pretty much. So, yeah.
I agree. That's not a fear. I think I've earned enough with my family that I can say no, because they do know they pull me a lot. It's actually a laughing joke. My sister says it all the time, and my best friend, when she says no, she means no. So, and they'll jokingly like, "Hey, Nat, can you do this?" And I'll say no. Are you serious? And they'll ask me again because they know I meant it the first time. So it's something I had to learn though, because I would do a lot. When I say learn, I'm 36. So this is something that's more like recent, like 2-3 years. It's not something that I was confident in saying 3 years ago. It's more so, no, I don't want to. And again, but it was respect that was built from whoever it was, and they understand. And I right now, to be honest with you, I haven't felt like I lost anyone. In the past, I felt like there was a fear, but I had to kind of do some self-assessing and figure out what's most important to me. So, for the most part, right now in my life today, no means no.
I think that's a good point Nancy made. I think that with boundaries, we teach people the boundaries. So you keep saying yes, 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 yes. When you say no and they get upset, what do you expect? Because every time you said yes, you didn't teach them their boundary of that you're not always available. So I think once you just say, not today, I need some time to myself, they'll understand that you're teaching them that, okay, she's not saying no because she's being mean, but because she needs some time to herself. So you have to teach people those boundaries.
I think also too, it's like for me, I also ask myself, like, how effective am I going to be within this yes? So, when you think about what we were talking about earlier with burnout, yeah, you can go ahead and say yes to everybody around you, but how effective are you going to be? Because I know for me, when I was at a point where I was just saying yes to everybody and I was burnt out and not listening to my own body, that's when I developed severe anxiety. Like it got to the point where it just, like, it was really, really severe. I can't even begin to explain. And then you're doing things you don't really want to do. You're angry doing it. And that's when you get to the point where you get home and you're complaining. Like, I tell my fiance all the time, sometimes my boss is making me do all these things and she's aggravated. And I'm like, well, did you tell your boss that today's just not the best day to ask you to do that project? And did you say something? Like, I'm always asking that, because I think when we start to say yes too much, now we're doing things and we're angry while we're doing it. We're not giving our best selves. We're not producing the best work that we can, because we're doing things that we don't really want to do. So I always ask myself, like, how effective am I really going to be if I say yes right now, as opposed to just waiting until another day?
I love that, because that's one of the things that I have some of my clients doing. I actually have them doing a questionnaire. Like, what are the 5 questions can you write down and ask yourself before you say a yes? Is this going to affect my family? Is this going to affect my mental health? Or do I have other projects? Do I have other things that I need to do? And I ask them to recite those questions, go through that list before you say yes to anything. And let that be like the way you can create boundaries and have that process of elimination before you say yes to things. And that has been effective with me. I start to think like, okay, is this taking away time from my family? Okay, do I have other things that I need to do? Is my cup already full? Okay. And then once I go through that, then I can determine if you're going to get a yes or going to get a
no. I love that. I love that insight. I love it. It's helping me now to understand with my fiance, if I'm putting too much on her now, so y'all are blessing. I'm about to say, y'all about to bless my relationship. I love it. Really quick, before we transition, because I'm going to bring Michelle in. Delisa, do you have, I would say, any words of encouragement that you want to share for just other Black women who are having trouble being vulnerable, who may be going through something, a young girl who's insecure? Do you have any just quick words of encouragement for them?
I would say the one thing that I'm really starting to be big on is healing. And I'm really learning that even as a child, I had a right to say something, regardless of, don't question this or don't question that. And I think it's the way to go about it. Like, growing up, me and my mom didn't have the best relationship for whatever reason. But now that I'm looking back on it and we've kind of restored it, I talk about this in my book. It's like there were so many moments where, even as a teenager, it's like I got angry and just went in my room and I cried to myself. She would say something that bothered me or whatever the case may be, and I would just go to myself. But even back then, I had the right to actually start my healing process to address those things with my mom. I didn't have to go on years down the line just carrying all of this pain and this hurt just because I didn't want to say anything. And so it's really just being aware, even at a young age, you know when something is bothering you. I literally have, my niece is only 7, and she literally says, like, when something is bothering her, when something is getting on her nerves, if it's like the kids are around and she's feeling stressed, she's like, Nana, I need to go in the room by myself. I want to go journal, or something like that. So I feel like even at a young age, you're aware of it. So I would say, even as a young girl, still put yourself first, still put your feelings first, and figure out a way to speak up about, what's bothering you or what you're going through without coming off harsh or without coming off mean. Just find a way to just balance that out with those conversations, so you don't carry those things around like years down the line, where it's like now you're trapped and you're having to go back and redo all of these conversations, which is something that I'm having to do, is just redo all of these conversations, because I didn't really know how to speak up back then. So I would say, as far as like insecurities, it's just really figure out if what's triggering your insecurity is even true. Because a lot of insecurities are based off of what somebody else has said. Like when I was a kid, I got bullied a lot. And so that just stayed with me to the fact when it was time for me to do something as an adult. Those words and things kind of like still stuck with me. But now it's like, was they even true? Even some of the people who were saying things then, now they're, you know, wanting to befriend and stuff like that. And another thing I've learned is that when you're a kid, you never know what's going on in somebody else's household. So somebody may be coming at you saying harsh things, but they might be dealing with, you don't know what at home, you know. So you really have to take that into account as well. It's something that I learned, because everything was just, I got bullied. And now that I'm grown, it's like, wow, if I was going through this at home with my parents and, you know, not having a dad around, I wondered if somebody else was going through that same thing, even some of the people who were kind of coming at me. So that's why I say you have to go back and you have to say to yourself, are these things true or not? Because you tell yourself your own truth. It's not about, you know, what somebody else says to you. Even people who are dealing with abuse and things like that, you know, from their parents, unfortunately, it's learn to know what you know about yourself. Don't let anybody tear you down or tell you that you're not going to be this or you're not going to be that, or just tear you down in general. Just learn it for yourself that those things are not true. Anything that's negative coming against you, that is not true. You know, so I just really want to just tell young girls to really just kind of learn themselves, which, like I say, you probably already know, but just really get to know yourself and figure out, you know, what's harming you and why is it harming you? Because a lot of it, like I say, is based on what somebody else has said about you, and it's just completely not true. You know, people are hurting you based off of their own hurt. So.
That was heavy. That was heavy. But I thank you so much and honor you for joining us, being transparent, sharing that insight and that encouragement. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure that it means a lot to, you know, those that are watching. It's a lot of people on actually right now. The young women that are watching, and those words of encouragement were very powerful. So I thank you. You're an amazing Black queen. And I'll be talking to you soon. Especially, I got to get your book too. So we got to talk a little bit offline.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that a little later. So.
Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a blessed night.
Bye.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and throw Michelle up in here. Give me 1 second. Boom, boom, boom. And we have Michelle. She came highly regarded by a great friend of mine. I consider him a brother. My guy, Mike Forrest. He was like, yo, you got to have her on. So we're excited to have you join us in this conversation and just share your insight, share your thoughts. And I'm actually going to backtrack on one of the questions that I asked earlier, just specifically for you to answer, because everyone kind of already answered. And that's in regards to the label of strong Black woman. How do you feel about that label? And has that prevented you in certain ways from being vulnerable because you were deemed a strong Black woman, so you had to uphold that title?
Well, Nate, thank you so much for having me tonight. I think your guest has already mastered the conversation. I'm going to just give my 2 cents, if it even matter, because they, you know, said a lot. I think I had to grow into believing that I was a strong Black woman, and it hasn't deterred anything. Actually, it has made me stronger, and it has increased doors of opportunity for me. And one of the things that I struggled with, and I think everybody have talked about this in particular, about counseling. I was married for 13 years. It was abusive in all of the forms of abuse. But the one thing besides God, counseling saved my life. Counseling saved my life. And what counseling did was reaffirmed and reminded me, and this is where the audience got to get to, it affirmed and reminded me who I was. Because sometimes life erases your confidence, your value, your self-worth. That's what life will do if you allow it to, or some, not all, but it erases who you were. So when I say counseling saved me, it reminded me so much of, oh yeah, I used to. And oh man, how did I forget that? And then I had to regain independence. I mean, I got divorced when I was, let's see, I'm 47 now. So it's been a long time. Okay. But in that, I'm like, how did I forget the independence? I was married. I got 2 kids. But the independence I lost. Good night. This is, woo! Y'all gonna have to write this down, y'all. The independence I forgot was the independence for Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
I just learned maybe 2 years ago that I was living life wrong. Mm-hmm. And when I say wrong, I had a problem being a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. That was my struggle. That was my downfall for everything. But what I had to learn was I had to become a promise keeper to myself first. So often, and so many women are being a promise keeper to everybody else in the world. Like, I'm going to keep my promise to you because my word is my bond, but we don't even keep our promise to ourselves. We don't, when we say, I'm going to start eating right. Man, you said that at 3. By 9, you eating like a whole steak and potatoes. Why are we forsaking the promise to ourselves? To ourselves. So when it comes to us feeling like other people don't hold us, with the best regard or let us down, well, wait a minute, sis. We let ourselves down.
Amen.
Ourselves down. So when it comes to understanding who we are, it's just not good night. It's just not about a blackness. It's about just being a woman. Just being a woman. And my light just went off. So I'm gonna have to figure that bad boy out so y'all can see. But that's the whole problem. We forgot who we were, and that's why we struggle. And the one thing that I want to make known that y'all was talking about being vulnerable, we can't expect, or my question was, how do we not feel comfortable, or let me rephrase, the reason why I think some women don't feel comfortable being vulnerable, you're going to want to write this down. Hold tight. You're going to want to write this down. It's because we're not vulnerable to ourselves first. And even when we cry, it's like, and then we try to shake it off. Like, okay, that's enough of that crying. No, if you're feeling some type of way, you should be able to be vulnerable in that moment. But the reason why we don't trust other people in that space to be vulnerable with other people, because in my own private space, I ain't even being honest with myself. Mm-hmm. So how in the world do we, and this is where I talk to women that are incarcerated and the women that are freed. I tell them that anything that you desire, if you haven't given it to yourself first, there is a problem. And I have really taught the women, especially that are incarcerated, be a promise keeper to yourself first. Yes, you want to be right for your children. Yes, you want to live a better life. But if you are not committed to yourself and what you say, then you're going to let them down because you're not committed. The commitment or the value, you're taking it from you and throwing it to everybody else. So value me because I can't value me. But then we look for them to value us. They don't know us. And my last point I'm going to make, so somebody can say something, is in regards to where does it come from and how can we get it better? And I think y'all already said it. It's that little girl. At one time in her life, that little girl in us, she was the bomb.com. She knew what she wanted to be, how she wanted to be. And because tragedy or trauma has happened, now remember, life erases who we were. So as grown women, we got to go back to that little girl and say, who were you? What did you like to do? And then we got to place some form of systems in place. So now that little girl can fly away. Some of us are holding that little girl hostage. As grown women, we're still holding her hostage and she want to be set free. So it's important for us to understand, and this is the whole thing with what I do, that there is absolutely more to us. There's more to us. And if we realize that there is more to us, we won't struggle the way we do. Because now I ain't making a promise to you that I didn't make a promise to myself first. So if I'm doing something for you, you better believe that I'm committed to Michelle first before I'm committed to you, to my friends, to my business, my children, my grandchildren, anything I'm responsible for. I'm a promise keeper to myself. That's all I got. I'm gonna try to fix my light.
Yeah. Thank you so much for just that insight, that promise keeper to yourself. And I tell people that all the time, is that you have to be the number one priority, because the fact of the matter is, how can I put my, the family first, but I'm not taken care of to actually provide for the family? I'm not mentally in the right space to do the things that I need to do to give you the best version of myself. So I understand completely on what you were saying, and that was extremely powerful. And I know somebody got something out of that. I know that really convicted somebody that's going to be watching this now or later. They're going to be really convicted by that. And I want to transition just a little bit in regards to, again, just vulnerability and things like that, because there's also this stigma of Black women being angry Black women when you don't want to do something. You know what I'm saying? It's that stigma. I hate it, honestly. But I want y'all to talk more about that. More so, how do you combat that? How do you get around that when you're seen as the angry Black woman, when you're not smiling, and when you want to do that, when you want to do your own self-care? You know what I'm saying? When you want to be like, nah, not right now. I really need to do this for myself. You're automatically seen or deemed as the angry Black woman. How do you emotionally handle that, and how do you kind of, like, I guess, navigate around that? I don't know if I'm asking it right, but it was just on my mind as you were talking. So I would love for all of you to kind of give your insight on that, because it's a terrible stigma. I hate it. I don't really understand it, but I'm hoping to gain some insight from each one of you on that whole just angry Black woman thing.
I'll start. And I'll start because I'm 5'10", I'm 200 plus. I'm not gonna give you my exact. And I naturally have a resting face. So no matter where I am, I walk in the door without saying a word, and I am the angry Black woman. And it didn't dawn on me until maybe a few years after high school. I said hello to someone, and they were like, "Oh, I'm surprised you spoke to me." I'm like, "Oh, that's weird." And it was because I did not like that resting face. And I was like, so that's what I've been giving off for all these years. So I had to be aware of who I am and what I represented before a word came out of my mouth. And that was very difficult because I can't do anything about my stature. Right. So for me, it was knowing when I walk into a room, no matter what that day was like, smile, Natalie. Right. Because the moment you don't smile, you have been labeled for the rest of your life. And that is very difficult for an Amazon woman, as we call ourselves sometimes. But once I realized that it actually made it easier, because I did not want people to think I was mean, because that's not, naturally who I am. I do speak my mind, but it's that's a fine line. And I realized that when I work with mostly women, and they can, let me talk about my previous experience. I'm sorry. I worked with a woman, and she was Caucasian, older woman, and she literally said to the boss, "Oh, I could just strangle you right now." And it was, ha ha. And I was like, you can't be serious. And I was the threat. So for me, it's like how, I had to be aware, and there was nothing no one can say. And it's just identical, unfortunately, to being a Black man. Like, no matter what you do, you walk in and everyone is afraid of you without saying a word. So it's very difficult, and it gets emotional around us because I'm around so many big Black people, like, just period. And that is just being aware. And the last week, and I know I'm going a little winded. I'm going a little long. Last week we were having a conversation with one of my mentors, who is just as tall as me, same height, and she's older. And she says, tell me about it. I had to deal with this my whole life. And you don't realize that it's not just you. You feel it in the moment. And what I used to do was, I don't care how they think about me, but what I did care. And I had to acknowledge I did care. So now for me, it's something as simple as walking in the room and just saying hello. it's the simple thing I do to just combat that stereotype about me and my stature.
And the funny thing is I've been through the same thing. I'm one of the Amazon women too. I'm about 5'10" myself. And especially being in the military, that's how people used to describe me. They would say that, when you're talking to Aisha, she's very direct. There was like a warning given before people would meet me. And I had to do exactly what she just said. I had to be more aware, because I think that, especially being in a leadership role, you already are asking to be in a position where attention is kind of drawn to you. So I did have to become more aware, because I didn't realize I had that face. I didn't realize that I was walking in not speaking. So I had to make adjustments within myself, but also learn how to communicate and get to know the people around me. I think self-awareness is so powerful, but also if you're working in a team environment, if you're around other people, recognizing that unfortunately people do see or assume that you might be a certain way, and also recognizing that, okay, when I walk into a room, I have to make sure I speak. When I walk into a room, or if I'm with my team, I know this person likes to chat first. I know this person, likes to do this first. So I make it an additional effort that in those spaces that I make adjustments. But yeah, it was something that I just had to work through because of my height, because, of my position, because I was supporting other people. I had to make the adjustment to ensure that I was aware of myself, make the adjustment, and also be aware of other people around me so they wouldn't feel threatened. But then I've seen it on the other side, because I have a team member who's shorter. She's a Black woman as well. And because she's shorter, people treat her the complete opposite. So I don't know what the height thing is, but they treat her completely opposite. And she has to work through, like, how are people going to treat me or take me more serious? And I'm like, I don't have that problem. But again, it's so interesting that height and stature has something to play with, has something to do with how people approach you. But again, I think it is a level of self-awareness, also considering what kind of roles and positions you go into, especially in your team environment, that you have to make the necessary adjustments so you can ensure that you are being effective, you're understanding other people around you, and also recognizing how you come off, which might need some slight adjustments.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I definitely hate it. I hate the stereotype. I think it's ignorant. I think, often Black women are considered loud or ghetto or whatever the case is. And, I'm 5'9" myself. And, I worked for an agency where I was the only African-American member on the management team. And not that anyone forced me into this role, but I would catch myself having to almost like check my posture, because I didn't want to be classified as like the angry Black girl, right? So, I would kind of tuck myself away, and then, it becomes a process of being intentional about who you are, and like, this is who I am. And, and if I'm going to speak, I'm going to speak with confidence. It doesn't mean that I'm angry. It doesn't mean that I'm ghetto or loud or whatever the other stereotypes are. But on the flip side, I also see this in a different light from a therapist standpoint when I am counseling or mentoring or whatever the case is, because I think a lot of how some Black women respond is trauma-based and based on that lack of vulnerability. So I think a lot of the times, unintentionally, Black women often are defensive, so there's a lot of reason for that, right? So we come off defensive. So I sometimes, and a lot of my clients, I can think of one specifically, who would say, if I say something, then all of a sudden I'm the angry Black woman. And I had to kind of check her and say to her, because of your trauma, you often respond with that, we talk about the flight, fight, or freeze. Your first response is to like jump, and your posture changes, your tone escalates. And I had to say, sometimes we do have to check ourselves. We do have to think about how we're responding and how we're coming off. So when you don't have that space where you can be vulnerable and comfortably and calmly express how you're feeling, the only other way to do that is to yell, because you want to be heard. Similar to what you were saying, Michelle, we want to be heard. And we feel like the only way to be heard is to scream and rage. But it's only because a lot of us didn't grow up having that space where we can calmly confide in someone and express how we're feeling. For actually this. And this goes beyond just the Black women. You see it in young black kids in general. To get the response that kids want, they scream, they yell, they'll throw tantrums, because for a lot of kids, that's the only way that they're going to hear. They're going to get a response back, whether it's positive or negative. That's the only way they're going to get some attention. So I see it in two different, perspectives.
I definitely agree with everybody. You definitely had to be aware. If you know me, I used to struggle with being angry. So I can say one thing to me and I will become enraged. And I think it's because as Black women, you always got to be strong. So if you're not addressing your emotions when you're upset or, hurt, it's going to come off as being angry. It was not until my job I'm at now when somebody told me, this is what they want from you. They want you to respond that way so you can say, look at her, an angry Black woman. So I had to change my thought process. Because I don't want you to control me. So now I'm going to respond differently. So I'm not going to give you that same response because now if I become what you believe I am, you have control over me. So now I always got to take a deep breath, sit back. And when I address things a different way, they're kind of like she didn't yell, she didn't snap, she didn't want to choke me out. So I think it's about just being aware. Okay, if you're feeling upset, take a step back, take a deep breath because they're already waiting for that angry Black woman to come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hate to take it there and make it like a race issue. But just as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everything, I'm just like, why do we have to always watch how we, passion is allowed, right? Sometimes where someone's more passionate about something, your voice is gonna elevate a little bit, and it just goes back to the stereotype that Black women, one of the stereotypes that Black women have to face on a daily basis, and it's frustrating, but we shouldn't have to go into meetings or into whatever it is. We shouldn't have to go into stuff asking ourselves, checking ourselves at the door, like, all right, let me make sure I'm presenting calm. And, we should be able to be ourselves is what I'm saying. We should be able to be who we are, whether it's your voice may, some people are soft spoken, some people have a volume that's naturally louder. We shouldn't have to always check ourselves. So it is one of those stereotypes, just in everything that we're talking about to pay attention to, because everyone's saying the same thing. I've heard it that everybody that spoke so far has said, like, all right, I gotta watch how I talk. And, we always got to watch how we do something. And that's part of the problem that we need to have these conversations about. And we got to be honest and call it what it is for what it is.
Hey, Nate, I didn't know you was going to have taller women on this. Because I'm like 5 foot and they keep saying I'm 5'7", I'm 5'9". Well, good night. But I get through it with my heels on, so whatever. But I think it's everything that everyone is saying. We have to be who we are, and it takes us longer. Some of us, not all. It takes some of us longer to be okay with who we are. And you're right that sometimes who we are is from a trauma base, or we're trying to recapture those years that we were bullied, because I was bullied. And so I felt at one point in my life I had to project a certain way because now I'm older. So now I could say what I want to say, how I want to say it, and all that kind. But it was coming from a bad place, not a place of truth. And again, I believe everything starts with us digging out those things, the roots, the trauma, the tragedy, all those things that lies within us. Because once we do it, then we'll see that we are better than what we are even projecting. Because I had to teach myself, even with the resting face, I had to teach myself to just have a smirk. I had to literally teach myself over the years to just have a smirk, because my resting face make me look like I'm mad, but I'm not mad. I'm just like sitting here waiting for something to happen, But I think if we get to the place of being okay, and not that place of saying, this is just who I am. I mean, come on, sis, you don't have to be, not always, but who you are I should be able to know you when you walk in the room. That's the powerful thing. Like, oh my gosh, like, who are these women? Like, who are they? I want to know before you even open your mouth, because it's that energy. And the energy has to be a good place within you for me to be captured like that and not the opposite way. So I think there are sometimes we need to be angry. Being angry is okay, but you have to choose your battles and how you deploy your message.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And everything y'all are sharing, man, it's just, it's so powerful and insightful. I think about, as all of you were talking, I was thinking about code switching. In my mind, I was thinking like, man, why do we have to do that? Like code switching. And on one side, it's like, are you walking on eggshells or are you moving in wisdom? You know what I'm saying? It's just like, which one are you feeling more? Do you feel like you as ladies have to walk on eggshells? That way you're not scrutinized, or is this a move of wisdom as you go into these different sectors? You know, how do you really feel about that? Are you comfortable with it, or are you to a point where it's like, all right, I'm tired of doing this. Like I shouldn't have to do this.
I think it's playing chess, not checkers, because of the fact that when you become aware and you become aware of what's around you, the fact that you are a Black woman or a Black man walking to a space and, you know, unfortunately, you have to put on where you know that, okay, I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to be up front and I'm going to be connected with all these people. It's like playing chess. Like you have to be strategic in how you move, because unfortunately, as much as we want things to be a certain way, as much as we don't want to see anybody else saying, I can't breathe, as much as we want to be able to go to our mailbox, be able to take a run, as much as you want these things to shift and change, unfortunately, if individuals don't make that change within themselves to be more loving and open and understand that we are all one under God, you have to be strategic in how you move in everywhere you go. So at this point, because I got that self-awareness, because I love what you ladies have been talking about getting that self-awareness, embracing like time seasons of singleness, getting to know who you are. Once you become aware of self, then now you can become aware of your surroundings and other people around you. And now you can walk in wisdom and be strategic about how you move in any place. So I'm just blessed to have that awareness of myself, because now I'm aware of everybody else and what's going on around me, and be effective in playing that chess game so I can move and adjust effectively, because I know that in this unfortunate world and space we're in, we have to make those adjustments in order for us to maybe get to a certain point, or not in a way where you're just doing it out of, I'm doing it because I want to be liked, or I'm doing it because I want to be accepted, but being strategic, because we are living in a world where unfortunately we're judged by how we look, judged by where we are, but it's just wisdom at this point. So it starts with self-awareness. Then now you're open to understand people around you, and now you can move strategically and with wisdom versus walking on eggshells. And walking in eggshells is you're not fully aware of yourself and the things around you.
Right. I think, I agree. I think it definitely is the wisdom, of course, at first. And then, you know, with wisdom, just like you said, I used to come self-awareness. You start to, you know, understand and just get to a point where you're really comfortable with who you are. Because I think back years ago, when I had a lot of like introspection and a lot of internal work to do, I was walking on eggshells. But walking on eggshells for a lot of people means not being comfortable with who you are. And being who I am, being a Black woman, specifically African-American woman, being openly a lesbian, a member of the LGBTQ community, a lot of the times my code switch meant be somebody else. Don't be who you really are, because you're not going to be accepted if you be who you truly are. So that was what walking on eggshells looked like for me. Then, you know, once you do that internal work and you really develop a better sense of self, and like what Michelle was saying, you dig back to that little girl, you get back to the roots, and you become a person who's 100% comfortable. That's where the wisdom kicks in, and now you feel comfortable being who you are, no matter what the setting is. You know, I'm thinking back to a couple years ago, just in my own growth, I would have never publicly admitted that I was lesbian. I would have never publicly admitted that years ago. But I'm at a point where I'm comfortable with myself, regardless of how that makes everybody else feel around me, because that's who I am. And I made a promise to myself to always be me, and no matter what setting I'm in. So I think that to me is where biblically, you know, everywhere, that's where the true wisdom lies, is being who you are and being comfortable with who you are. Because again, just referencing what Michelle was saying, the world is gonna It's going to shift who you think you are. It's going to tell you this is who you have to be. And we're going to be constantly faced with so many like information overload, you know, especially for the Black women. Just to even take it a step further, we're constantly being told who we got to be. We got to change how we look. We got to change our hair. We got to change our face. We got to do all these different things. So it really is hard. I know we say, you know, you got to become self-aware. You got to develop a better sense of self. It's a truly a difficult process, specifically for the Black woman. It's really not that easy to just be yourself. It's really not. So again, it just takes being intentional, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of introspection.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
And everything that you said is so true. I think the only time in my life, and it was years, that I walked on eggshells is when I forgot who I was. Mm-hmm. And that was during that time that I was going through the divorce and the separation, all those years. And then the residue from that, I still walked on eggshells. And the only reason why is because I forgot who I was. I'm telling you, when you know who you are and you believe who you are and you become okay with who you are, there's no longer a need to be, I'm not sure. The only reason why I might change my personality is my personality. I may change the tone because of my audience, but who I am, the essence, I think the world needs Michelle, just like the world needs all of you. Because if the world don't have Michelle, then that measure, that percentage of who I am, the world is in trouble. And if we all put ourselves together and become the person that we were ultimately supposed to be, then the world will look differently. But until we see and become who we are, there's always going to be a struggle. Not even in just the world, in our homes, in our relationships, in our community. That's why some relationships aren't working well, because the person that we say we are ain't really who we are. And then we're choosing people based upon our drama, our trauma, our issues, all those things. So then we come up and say, well, I don't know why that I was messing with him or her. It's because that's who you are. You are who you are. So who you are, you're going to deploy it. That's why I always go back to us. I'm going to say this. I meant to say this earlier. Is I know that we all need accountability partners. I understand it. I know the definition of it. But why is it? And this is a question to all of you. Why is it that we need an accountability partner when it comes to us? We don't need accountability to go to work. I don't need y'all to call me to go to work. I don't need y'all to call me to pay my bills. I don't need you to call me to pay, talk to my kids or my grandkids, go to church. But when it comes to working out, that's a reflection of eating right. I need somebody to hold me accountable to me. Hold me accountable to me. Why? Why is it? And I'm saying I've been there, done that, and sometimes I still do. But why has life presented itself? I need you to help me be accountable to me being better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It got me thinking. Wow. Why do I need
I would like to add
somebody else
on the original question, Nate, on eggshells versus wisdom, because I believe it's very good. I don't think I've ever walked on eggshells until now, because of the responsibilities that I'm now undertaking. And I say that is very weird, because before I wisdom, I'm a strategist. I need to make sure people are around me who are leaders who will help. Whatever my role is, I need everyone around me to play their part, and I have to make sure I guide them. And and then the higher I went into my role, I realized that, and it's funny. I think I had a conversation yesterday. Like, I'm not being the best me. Like, I'm not. This is not who I am. I always find someone next to me, near me, away from me that I can mentor, that I can lead. But it's funny that you asked the question now, because today I feel like I'm now on eggshells. Now I have to reflect. I really do have to reflect, because that's not me, and it's never been me. So I appreciate that question more than you realize.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, one quote that I really live by, it's by Maya Angelou. She said, very similar to what you said, Michelle, tell the truth to yourself first. And I think there's this process of introspection that we fear, but we all need it so much on a daily basis. Like, if you want to, you know, break these barriers, if you want to be able to get to the place where you can hold yourself accountable, you have to be able to be introspective. You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself questions like what Michelle just asked. Why is it that I am unable to do this? Why do I feel this way about myself? Why am I angry? Why do I constantly respond this way? Why is my first thing to be on the defense, you know, as opposed to being an active listener? Like, those are questions that you have to ask yourself. But again, it takes willingness, and it takes getting a little bit uncomfortable, because it's not a fun process to have to do. You know, just a lot of my own personal traumas, having to sit there and really ask myself, like, you know, why am I like this? You know, why am I this way? It's you start to just dig up a lot of things that you had buried for so long, a lot of things that are going to hurt you, a lot of things that are going to bring tears, bring up all these unwanted emotions. But that is where growth happens. That is where you get to the point where you find out who you are. That is where you cross the barrier between walking on eggshells to wisdom and things like that. It really starts by just asking yourself those questions on a regular basis. And I've been blessed to be at a point in my life where I'm constantly introspective, and I'm constantly asking, why did I respond this way? You know, when I lash out at somebody, why did I just lash out like that? You know, I always go back and ask myself, why did I just do that? And I really try to just dig deep to where that came from. And that's the only way that I've been able to fix and repair certain things in my life right now.
And you know what? I think it's a blessing that we're even able to do that, because the reality is a lot of people they can't recognize when, oh man, you know what? I need to self-reflect. So even though we have to do that, that is such a powerful thing, because there's so many people who don't have that practice. So it's important that we do make sure that it is something that we're doing on a regular basis. I love the book, Michelle Obama's Becoming, because we are constantly becoming. I love the age ranges. I love that we can show that regardless of your age, regardless of what season you're in, you could be 90 years old watching this, you still have an opportunity to become self-aware, to be someone that starts to be, you know, self-reflective. There's still a chance for you to do that, but it's such a blessing to be able to be vulnerable and even share that we have to check ourselves. But the fact that we can be like, okay, something's off, let me start checking myself, let me start being self-reflective. And if you're not at the point where you can do that, be more intentional to check yourselves every 30 days. Okay, every 30 days on the 28th of the month, let me reflect on this month. Was I productive? Did I hold myself accountable? Was I self-aware? And really just make that into a practice, so it becomes a natural thing that you can trigger yourself and say, something's off. I need to do a self-reflection moment. So it's powerful that we're able to even do that, because there are a lot of people who can't recognize that they have holes in their own systems.
And I think that's where I heard you and Michelle mention, that's where therapy can be effective, because there's a lot of people who don't even know where to begin with, you know, some people may even ask themselves that question. And if you don't know that your behavior is problematic, if you don't know that, you know, there's something that can be changed, you're not going to know where to begin. You're not going to know where to start. And that's where therapy is important. And that's where things like this, we need to have more discussions like this, because a lot of Black women, Black families in general, you know, I work in the emergency room, and I do mental health evaluations. So saying the word therapy to a Black family, the looks I get, they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean therapy? What do you mean medication? What do you mean she's diagnosed with this? Like, it's taboo. And I think it is so important to just shift the stigma of what therapy is and what it means to have a therapist or whatever the case is, have a counselor, a mentor, however people want to label it these days. But that's where it's so important, because there are some people who are blessed to be able to do that work themselves and don't need a therapist. But then there are some people who's going to need a little bit of help, and is going to need that space where they can grow and learn to get to a place to where they can do these things on their own. So it really starts with having conversations like this, because I see it every day in the emergency room, how much Black families are so unaware, so ignorant to mental illness and Black women, Black men, whatever the case is.
That's so true. I know that to be so true because, you know, I grew up in a way where it's like you'll have that uncle or that person that's at the house that like, oh, that's just a crazy such and such. And it's like you realize that as you get older, like, oh snap, he really has some issues. Or she has some like mental issues, and we never addressed it. They were just the normal crazy cousin. And we never addressed it in a way where we just kind of looked over it. And then you realize you go through life and nobody's ever talked about therapy, any of these things because of the stigma of looking crazy. But the reality is we crazy because we didn't go take them to the therapist or even try to figure out what was wrong. So I hope that what you all are sharing is really opening someone's eyes to the changes that need to be made, the stigmas that need to be broken. And I want to shift the conversation one more time because I don't want to keep you ladies all night. This is actually an incredible conversation. Like my fellas that was on the last live stream, we got to step it up because this is incredible. And it's a lot of like comments coming in. I'm loving everything. And you are all teaching me so much. Like I got notes and everything over here. So I thank you all. And I want to shift the conversation one more time. And I have like 2 more questions, possibly 3. Again, I don't want to hold you too long. But in the heat of everything that's going on right now, just in Black America, with the most recent of tragic events with George Floyd, obviously we had Sean Reed just a couple of weeks, Ahmaud Arbery. When I talk to my fiance, there is a fear that she has for me leaving the house, right? And it's pretty insane. And I want to hear all of your insights in regards to maybe family members or friends that you have, males, men, that are going out into this world. And there's a fear of that individual not coming home because of a racist act, because of evil, because of hate, because someone had a bad day, you know, mainly a police officer or someone that is Caucasian. Explain your concern for Black men with everything that has, you know, transpired. I would love to hear some insight on that because, like I said, I talked to my fiance about it, and for me, it gives me an anxiety knowing that she's worried. You know, so I would love to hear your insight on that.
Man.
Well, one of the things that I don't have any sons, but I have male friends and my brother. But it's at the point where I'm not just concerned about the men, I'm concerned about all of us because we're all experiencing some type of injustice. And one of the things I refuse to do is live in fear in anything. I, make sure I communicate with my children, communicate with the men that I know and my brother, and just making sure that we're talking, and maybe in that conversation, they're coming up with some creative things that they can do. I know with my nephew, he lives in DC, and he says that as soon as he pull over, he has his stuff in a plastic bag and he put it right on the dashboard with his hands. So he already has created a system within himself that is, if he's pulled over, this is what he's going to do. It's unfortunate, but I'd rather him have a system that he could put in place and he could talk about it later. But it's just not for the men. It's all of us. And it's so sad that I know, what do they say? Things come around. Everything comes around in circles or whatever the phrase is. Yeah. And I'm so, it's devastating to know that what our ancestors went through, some of what they went through is coming back in this season that we're in, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say I have a different, I have a very interesting experience because I'm African, right? So I wasn't introduced to Black history and racism until I came to the US. I'm like, because what I grew up in pride and culture. So it wasn't until I came to the United States when I started to learn about this thing called racism and Martin Luther King, I'm like, who are all these people? And then the second thing, I'm a foreigner. So you see the injustices and the situations happening to people that are foreign born, trying to come to the United States and and migrate here. Then I have a father who practices Islam. He's Muslim. So you see certain discriminatory behavior to people who are, follow the Islamic faith. And I serve in the military. So I have taken the oath. I salute the flag. And I'm like, I have to represent my country. But then when I walk out, even though I reside in this country, I have to consider my son and his experiences. I have to consider my Black, the Black men that I work with. And it's interesting to be able to, wear a uniform. And I wear my uniform so proudly. I love serving the United States Air Force. But then I also think when I take my uniform off, or my brother and sister in arms, they take it off, I'm just a Black person. They don't know I'm African. They don't know my father's Muslim. They don't know any of these things. So I'm having a hard time with it because, again, I grew up we don't have these issues back home. If anything, it's more political injustices. So it was just like I was thrown into a space where I'm seeing all these videos I'm just like, Mom, Dad, did y'all ever experience this? They're like, nah. That we didn't grow up. We grew up with pride and culture, knowing our history, knowing we came from kings and queens. And now I'm coming into a culture where we started off as slaves. What does that even mean? So for me, I always wore these battles because I wear a uniform, because I connect so much to immigration, because my father's a follower of Islam, because of all those things. So I know, because I'm so deeply connected to Black America now. I know that as I reside here, I'm here. Yes, I can pack up and go to my country, but I have to make sure that I'm raising my son and my children, and I'm aware of what's going on, so I can make sure I, have those conversations with them, because it's hard for me, because again, I didn't grow up with that, but I live in a country where that is the reality. And as I'm here, I have to do the work and connect to my Black American brothers and sisters and raise awareness about it. But it is really hard to see, because again, I see both sides of it, because I'm just like, you guys don't know your culture. You can do so much. Don't believe that you can't do nothing. Look at where I came from. But the reality is I see the systematic issues. And there was even an article that came out today that talked about even Black people who serve in the military. They are typically reprimanded more. They're the ones being penalized more. So it is hard, but that's the reality. And I'm really now pushing leaders and raising awareness now for leaders, people in leadership, to have these conversations, to empathize and understand that we're all different, and we have to, at least, you might not understand it, but you have to be able to empathize with the people around you that have so many different backgrounds.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's been more spiritually moving, I should say, for me, just everything that's been going on, because, I'm a very, very highly spiritual person, and I know where my trust lies. My trust is in God, not in the world. I walk by faith and not by sight, but I would be lying to say if I told you guys that I haven't been afraid, and I play basketball. I wear hats sometimes. So when I'm driving, my fiance, it's like the things that she has to remind me about before I leave the house. Like when I'm driving, so before I leave, she's like, make sure you take your hat off. Like, you don't want to wear a hat because they're going to, you don't want them to think you're a guy or anything. I have dreads or whatever the case is. So she is constantly saying things like that to me. Like, if it's at night, again, make sure you take your hat off. Like, because of my job, because of the jobs that I have done in the past, she'll say things like, make sure you keep your badge in sight so they know what you do for work. And it's just like, to me, it's just more, it's more like, more so I had to have a real deep conversation with God, just because I'm fearful. And I'm not the type of person that's moved by, move meaning like, I don't easily move into a position of fear. That's really never been me, especially because of how strong I'd like to consider my relationship with God is. But lately, I've really been feeling afraid. Really, really, to be honest, just been feeling afraid and confused and uncertain, just of what's next, honestly. So that's really just where I am with it, and it's one of those topics where I'm at the point right now where I really don't even know how to address it, how to really put the words together.
For me, it does hit home, because at home I do live with a 6'6", really black, dark man with a beard and an afro. So for me, the fear is different. And you feel it and you hear the stories. And for me, I honestly try to avoid them because I didn't want to become too emotional. It's like, out of sight, out of mind. Don't read it. Although it keeps coming on your timeline, just don't. But, I'm hope he doesn't mind me telling the story. But I think it was last year, it was late. He took the bus home and he's like, yeah, I had to take this 2-mile walk. I'm like, why didn't you cut through the park? Well, it was dark. I'm a black man wearing all black. Oh, wow. So versus taking the shortcut, got to take the long way. And it's not something I considered ever because, I'm female. But to hear that, it's like, but this is our home. And we walk this path all the time. And he had to think about that. He had to say, no, I don't want to risk it. I have all black. I wear my headphones and I'm walking. It's like, oh, I can. And then I start thinking about all of my family members who, like everyone who's having babies are having young males. Like, what's happening? So how do we protect them? And, I love bringing up this story when I'm around a group of people that know him. Oh, Mike is so nice. Well, I wish everybody else would see that, without speaking to him. And I say it on purpose so you can understand that you think he's nice because you had the opportunity to have a conversation with him. But if you saw him without speaking to him, you would be threatened. And that is a tough line. So it's like, as Black women, I think we have the power to educate people. And I don't think we do it enough. And I think it's how we tell our stories and the passion we put in our stories and how we lay our words and when we lay it down. And strategically, it can't be emotional, but it has to tell a story for them to understand it. Like, oh, don't you think he's nice? But just imagine he walked down the street the other day and he was afraid. Really? But that's for me, it's like, I'm just going to use this opportunity to educate the people who I feel need to be educated. It's very scary, very scary.
Wow. I think for me, I'm definitely fearful. My nephew is 13 years old and he is 6'2". He plays basketball. So many times you'll see him running with earphones on or at a park, playing basketball. And the fact that he's scared and he's 13 years old bothers me. And that's because you can't hide from it. Social media, it's all you see when you're on social media. So for the last 2 months or 2.5 months of being on quarantine, 2 incidents happened that was worldwide. So everybody's talking about, these 2 people, one was running and one was bird watching, who was killed. So like everybody's saying, what can you do? Even as women, we're driving. If a cop is behind us, our heart is racing. Pull me over? Is he gonna pull me over? And before you were scared of getting a ticket. Now you're scared of, are they going to yank me out of my car and arrest me or kill me because I'm Black? So I think Walina was talking about just having faith in God and just trusting God, but also we have to be real that this is reality. So we can trust God, but we have to be honest with ourselves too and realize that, okay, we can't live in fear because if so, you'd be stuck in your house because this is reality. We have to be more aware. So I think it's just about being aware, trusting God, and then also, like Natalie said, social media break. Because I just tell my nephew, you have to read everything on social media because now at this point, you're just stressing yourself out and you're 13 years old. And before you know it, you're going to be afraid to even go to the park by yourself. And it shouldn't be that way.
I agree. I agree. Definitely with the social media break from time to time, just media break in general, be informed, but don't get consumed. You know what I'm saying? Know what's going on, but don't be consumed by it to where it attacks your mental health. And I appreciate each one of you sharing because, like I said, that was a real conversation and a real concern that, my fiance had as well as myself. And it's just like, man, you just want to make it home, to see your family and your loved ones. So that is a real, and again, it's not a fear in the sense of where I'm scared to do things, but it's a concern for my younger brothers, for my niece, my nephew, just all of us in general. So what I'm going to do is this, because I want to wrap up a little bit. We've been on for about an hour 30. I can really just keep going with y'all and just talk all night. But I want to transition it one more time just to end this off. And a lot of people actually requesting for us to do another one with just the ladies. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but I would be more than welcome to have y'all back. More than welcome to have y'all back. So I guess my last question, I want to bring a little more light to things and really just send out some encouragement. So how are each of you, you know, in your profession and your normal life, whatever it is, how are you encouraging and inspiring that next generation of Black girls? Like what are the things that you are doing, like practical things? You know, let us know, let people know.
So I've been mentoring for a very long time. For middle school, I have a passion for that age group. But for me, I just need them to be themselves. Be happy with who you are, like you said, like Michelle said, whoever you are when you were a little girl, and I love it. Like watching these same people when they were 10 and see them now at 20, it's like you were the exact same person once you realized what made you happy. You were able to blossom. So for me, it's that. Like I do have one mentor. I think she's watching. I always say, everybody can see how gorgeous you are without it being fitted and short. Respect yourself and know who you are. Like it's just that's what I love. And I love to mentor people who I always say, like me, I always go for the wild child, the person who always wants to fight, the person who's angry, because at some point for a long time, I was that person. And for those people who make mistakes and the people who, second chances are out there. Like, a lot of people don't hear about them, but most of us we were at risk. We still are at risk. I always tell people, I'm always at risk from cursing somebody out and losing it all. That is my reality. It's me knowing who I am and knowing that when someone is getting me there, that you have to pull back. It's, this ain't for you. Are you ready to risk it all? So again, it all goes back to just know who you are, and no one can take that away from you. That's what I have to share.
And for me, I knew I had to live it first. I had to be the example. So I started off, like off the rip, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse and sexual violence. So I automatically started off going out and raising awareness. But then I had to recognize that I had to heal as well. I had to make sure that I wasn't getting in, making sure I was being mindful of the relationships I was in. So I think that it's so important that first, that even if you are going to go out and do the work to support other Black girls, to ensure that you are living and walking it. And yes, you're not going to be perfect, but it's so important that we get the help we need, because every time I give them advice or I give them the support, I always ask myself, I check myself. I'm just like, okay, am I doing the same thing? Am I making sure I assess my relationships? So that's definitely highly important, but definitely I mentor. One of the organizations that I love is Girls Empowerment Network. I've always been supporting young girls in some kind of way, because again, I always think about myself, and there's so many resources that young girls have now that I didn't have when I was growing up. I'm like, man, I wish I had conferences and nonprofit organizations doing all these things. So I always make myself available, and I'm connected with a bunch of mentoring organizations where I give of myself and I share my story. So first, get that healing yourself if you are thinking about helping other girls, other Black girls, but also remember that, share your story. Your healing is going to help them understand. And you can agree why, because a young girl who got pregnant when she was 16 did not believe that she could finish school while pregnant. So I was like, I'm going back to school because I need to make sure I'm representing the same thing I'm talking about. So I'm graduating in a couple months, and I'm going to reach out back to her and say, listen, I did it. At my age with 2 kids, single mom, you can do it too. So I think, again, just make sure that you are living it and you're walking it. And then when you are getting your healer in that process, share your story and let them know and make yourself available, because there's so many young girls out there that need to hear your story and see someone that was able to triumph and get over a lot of the things that they're struggling with.
Yeah, I agree. I do a lot of mentoring myself. I do a ton of speaking engagements as well. And really, I just try to show people I try to live by example. Just like you said, I try to live it and not just be, what it's almost like, it's like the Bible verse. What is faith without works? What is my word if I'm not if I'm not embodying that, if I'm not living it. So I just try to really show people that you can really be who you are, no matter what that is. Like, you know, I am heavily involved into mental health. I'm also a designer. I love fashion. I'm also, you know, very spiritual. I have a relationship with God. I'm lesbian. So I remember I just used to think that I couldn't be any of those things altogether, because how can I be gay but have a relationship with God? And how can I do this but be able to still do that? And the message I try to give out to people is that you can do and be who you are, no matter what that is. And you can work all things together. And that really is just it. It's just, I try to be an example to the younger generation by how I live my life, because that is the one thing that, for the most part, I can control is my actions and what I'm doing with the time I have here on earth. So.
So I also mentor middle school students. If I can give one word of advice, I would definitely say follow your dreams. I think oftentimes we think that our dreams are too big, so we put them all in one box along with ourselves and don't go after what we really want. And even now, as an adult, I'm still learning that. If anybody know me, I do not do public speaking, but I'm growing. I'm like, I have a lot to say. So I think it's just like, you know, don't limit yourself, regardless of how you feel. If you fail, get back up and try again. You know, it's life is about you making mistakes. You got to embrace them as much as you embrace your accomplishments. So just keep following your dreams. Don't give up. If you want to change your career, it's never too late. Just like she said, you're 90 years old, you're still becoming. So just keep going after everything that you want to have.
Mm-hmm. I think what I give back is what we're doing now. Conversations are everything. Conversations are everything. And I think the more that we talk, and not talk just to talk, but talk with some information and some instructions along with inspiration, then we could change a whole generation. When I'm talking to younger women and the younger kids, I'm always being honest. And I think that's where some of us may have missed out when we were younger. Nobody wanted to be honest. And you already know in our community, whatever happens in the house stays in the house. So you ain't even know who to tell, where to get help from, or whatever. So, you know, it's a lot of what we're doing right now. And I welcome all of you guys to come over and talk on my platform and have those dialogues, because the more we talk, the better we'll become. And then we'll realize we're not the only ones. There are women just like us, and they just need to see that, wait a minute, if they can do it, maybe I could do it. Because we make it seem like change is so far-fetched, is so far removed from us. But the change happens when you make that decision, and the decision to change always happens again with you.
Amen. And Nate, one more thing. I don't want to, take up too much time, but don't be afraid to mentor young Black boys either, ladies, like anybody listening, because one of the things that was eye-opening for me, I actually mentor young boys, is that by you getting in front of them, and these are middle school boys, you're dispelling a lot of the wrong information they're learning about Black women. I had one of the young boys tell me that, I don't date Black girls because they're ghetto. And I said, no, it's not that you don't date Black girls because they're ghetto. You don't like a certain type of personality trait, which anybody can exude. So I had to teach him in that moment about understanding you don't like this type of personality trait. It's not tied to a color. It's tied to a behavior. And he was like, oh, I never thought about it like that, miss. So don't be afraid to educate our young boys too, because I was afraid when I started to do it. I was like, I don't know if I can mentor young boys, but you're teaching them a lot of things and undoing a lot of the things that they're learning in the household, which might not necessarily be effective. So challenge yourself, go out there and reach out to these young boys, because it's been transformational for me to be able to educate them from my perspective, so they don't walk into manhood with the wrong kind of data and information.
Oh yeah. Ooh, that's so, wow. That's so powerful. I never even thought of it from that perspective, of having a woman step in to do that. Because here's the reality, and this might be me going off on a tangent, but growing up, I learned more about a body count before I found out about a bank account. You know what I'm saying? I learned more of, we were almost taught that women were property and not humans. They were items for our pleasure. And I think that that's huge, that you are doing that. Praise God that I'm not that way anymore. Much wiser, much more mature. But that is a huge issue, and a lot of it's accredited to, you know, the media, the music we listen to, all these different things. And I think it's huge that you're stepping in to do that, because the reality is we have to learn how to love our women. We have to learn how to treat them, you know, like the queens they are. We have to learn how to treat them with respect, and we can't do that without the perspective of a woman almost stepping in. You know what I'm saying? We can't just do it from the male perspective, because the reality is, if I can be honest, there's not a lot of us that are stepping up in that sector to go ahead and speak on them young men about it. And the reality is, when you talk to them, a lot of them aren't listening. But to have a woman, a strong Black woman come in and really share that insight is powerful. And I really applaud you. And I applaud all of you for everything that you're doing. And I just can't thank you enough for joining me this evening and just getting on this platform and just dropping so many gems. And so I know people are going to be like replaying this for a while. And I just truly appreciate each and every one of you. And I'm excited to do this again. So before we hop off, I'm going to have every one of you, I guess, share, you know, it could be your website, it can be your social media handles, whatever it is, because I promise you, people want to go and follow you and understand some other things, and they may have questions. And I want to be able to provide that for our audience. So we'll start with Natalie, Aisha, and then we'll work our way down.
Okay. Well, I'm really a social media butterfly. I usually say no to these things, but my cars convinced me to do this. So, but I mentor youth exposure if you need me. You can find me on Facebook. My last name is Devonish. I did not write it on here, but it's spelled Devonissh. Thank you. Wait, it should say Dr. Natalie. I forgot to tell y'all that because I earned that
Go ahead, doctor.
A month ago. Now,
Hey.
Come through.
Let's go.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. Like, let's get it. But you guys can follow me on all social media platforms is at Miss Aisha Speaks, MSAISHA Speaks. Or you can go to my website, aishathomas.org. If you want to reach out, please. Like I said, I'm always about mentoring and supporting, individuals grow. So please reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns, or mentorship questions. So thank you for having me. It's been a blessing and an honor to be on this platform with you, Nate, and with all you amazing women.
I echo the same thing. I'm super duper excited to be here. I'm not sure if I'm the shortest, but it doesn't matter because whatever, we're moving past that. Okay. Like whatever. Okay. We're over that. Okay. Nate, thank you so much for having me. I am Michelle Washington. You can find me on Facebook at Michelle Washington. I'm also the founder, the creator, the ambassador, the advocate for women of more around the world. So make sure you follow Women of More magazine. It's called Women of More Mag. That's on Facebook and Instagram.
Wow, that's great. Nice to meet you. I'm so sorry. My car's into your more women of more a long time ago. I'm sorry. Very nice to officially meet you.
As well, we got to connect. So definitely follow. You'll see the link. We just released our latest edition of Women of More magazine, and on Sundays, not this Sunday, but I have a show called Women of More Conversations. I love talking with women. I love being inspired and picking up some nuggets. So it's a pleasure meeting all of you guys. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nate, thank you again for having me. I love you. You're like, you're a brother to me. We go back to way back to college basketball days. But I just wanted to definitely tell you thank you for having me on here. But Facebook, you can find me at Willeen K. Part. On Instagram, you can follow me at Willie Speaks is my Instagram, and that's WILLY Willie Speaks. Like I said, I'm also a fashion designer, and the website for my clothing line is www.phaseofficial. That's PHASE, phaseofficial.com. And yeah, that's where you can find me. So thank you guys, and thank all you ladies for being on here with me. I definitely learned a lot, took a lot of notes. So I really appreciate all of you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nate, for having me, pulling me out of my comfort zone. I also mentor with Natalie for Youth Exposure of Atlantic City, middle school students. So if you know any middle school students that need some mentoring, boys and girls, send them our way. And my name on Facebook and Instagram is Mika Lynn, so MEKALYNN.
Thank you, Mika. I appreciate, again, each and every one of you. Everyone that's tuning in, that's watching. If you're watching it live, if you're catching the replay, please make sure to follow these amazing women. Delisha was here as well, so I know her Facebook is Delisha. Where's Delisha? Actually, you know what? I'll put it in the comments for y'all to follow later. But again, make sure you follow them. They're doing amazing things. Aisha, real quick, I don't know if you shared the title of your podcast. Do you mind sharing that as well?
Come on. Okay. Sorry. My podcast is called, I'm forgetting all these things. As I'm talking, I'm like, I forgot. But check out Internal Fire. It's Internal Fire with the Y, INTERNALFYRE. So please check it out. A lot of good conversations there. I'm really talking about, I'm a leadership and team development expert. So my goal is to really embed leadership dependent, you're a leader at home, you're a leader in the workspace, but again, it's really embedding those skills into every leader so we can impact change worldwide.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And my mom said, thank you, ladies. This was truly blessed. So that means a lot to me that she's on here and that you are all speaking so much life and empowerment. And again, I just want to thank y'all, man. Appreciate you. Just tell you how much I love each and every one of you. I value you. And everything you're doing is extremely important. And I'm so glad that we had this conversation because it's pushing for change. That's a huge thing for me. My whole movement is change what we normalize. And you ladies are doing that. You're leading the force. And every day you're stepping up to the plate and you're making things happen. As you can see, my shirt, Black women are really everything. I throw my shirt on. Love y'all. I appreciate you. And then I'll be talking to each of you offline just to discuss some things and again, express my gratitude. So I hope that y'all have a great evening. Everyone that tapped in and tuned in, I appreciate you. If you can, please share this because we never know who this conversation may bless. We never know who may need to hear some of these gems that are being shared. It can really change and impact and influence somebody's life. So please, please, please leave them some love. Make sure y'all follow them and what they're doing. Make sure you support them and what they're doing. Make sure you tell another woman that you love them, uplift them, and everybody just have a blessed night. So I'll talk to y'all ladies. If you can actually.
Thank you, guys. All right. Bye.
So everybody, we talk to y'all later. Y'all have a blessed one.
Who did you have to say?
Huh?
You asked him.